It's been a hot minute since our last video. Actually, 100,000 hot minutes. I did the math. Our last video was that huge gold and silver beta episode, which dropped during E3. I was super proud of that video, and after getting to meet all kinds of members of the game industry at E3, I got home super inspired to make another big video just like the last one. But instead of writing something crazy and amazing, I kinda just kept writing these half-finished scripts that I wasn't super happy with. This summer, I have had crazy writer's block. The worst I've had in years. I haven't had gamer's block this summer though. Between streaming, the summer Steam sale, and just playing with friends, I've played more games this summer than any I can remember since I was a kid. I love video games, and I think the perfect way to break this writer's block is going to be just talking about some of the amazing games that I've been enjoying lately. Let's start with something a little more familiar to our main audience, Nintendo Switch stuff. Octopath Traveler. This is the clear spiritual successor to Bravely Default that I've been loving lately. The pop-up book pixel effect, combined with modern lighting and shadows, looks shockingly good, the orchestrated soundtrack is constantly moving, and it's a blast trying to outsmart and completely break the combat system. It even has solid voice acting. The only downside for me is that for a game with 8 main characters, they pretty much never interact with each other during an individual character story. Love the overall world though, and picking up mini story quests one chunk at a time feels perfect on the Switch. Splatoon 2 Octo Expansion. Splatoon 2's original campaign never really gripped me, but the Octo expansion is challenging, engaging, varied, and weird. Not every level has the same amount of good and fair design choices, but there's enough winners here to scratch that puzzle platforming shooting itch. The expansion's also pretty funny, from conversations between your favorite Splatoon 2 personalities to the ridiculous 80s and 90s references floating around everywhere. The pretty consistent difficulty might turn some away, but the sheer amount of interesting content keeps Nintendo's trend of high-quality DLC living. Mario plus Rabbids Donkey Kong Adventure. Speaking of quality DLC, the DK edition of Mario plus Rabbids adds a good 10 hours to the same great, well-designed tactics adventure. Donkey Kong feels appropriately OP, and using the ability to throw enemies or allies at will, or swinging around on the vines, really makes you feel like anything is possible. There's a ton of charm and some solid enemy designs, but this game kinda swings in the opposite direction of the Splatoon 2 DLC. I found DK Adventure to be kinda easy compared to the main game. It's still a heartfelt and decently sized adventure, but it might not push you as much as the other Mario plus Rabbids challenge packs. Iconoclasts. This game just recently launched for the Switch, even though I did technically play it a little earlier on this bad boy. What? It's a completely legitimate gaming platform! For Persona 4 Golden and almost nothing else. Anyways, Iconoclast is a gorgeous pixelated Metroidvania built around a mix of close-range and long-range combat, platforming, and weapon-ranged environmental puzzles. I actually really couldn't get into the story and writing for this one. It's inconsistent and never an easy read, but it is refreshing to at least see a darker story attempted in this style of game. The highlight of this for me though was the bosses. They're huge, they've got these intelligent, evolving phases, and they're just satisfying to topple. It really is impressive that this game was made by just a single creator over a decade, and the overall gameplay made the trip worth it for me. Hollow Knight. This is the big boy. This is probably my favorite on today's list. Like Iconoclasts, it's another Metroidvania where my favorite part was the bosses. There are dozens of unique bosses, each with completely different fighting styles and amazing animations. The Soul-style death system makes you want to constantly explore its complex labyrinth, but every enemy or trap keeps you on your toes with the constant fear of losing all your money. This game oozes style, and sometimes literally oozes, with a humongous insect-themed world that is equal parts disgusting and beautiful. While some of Hollow Knight's secrets are just a little too obscure for my tastes, I was blown away by how much content is crammed into it. Literally, as I'm putting the final touches on this video, there was another huge content pack that just got released, Godmaster. It looks like I'll be crawling back down into the Hollow Nest again soon. Dead Cells. Ooh, do I make a plagiarism joke here? Nah, it's been done before. It wouldn't be very original. But in my real, honest, actual opinion, this game is insanely fun. It's our third Castlevania in a row, but this time it's a roguelite. When you die, you go all the way back to the beginning, but you do bring a couple of permanent upgrades along the way, and you can expand your weapon and treasure pool as you play. This game encourages you to go full speed. Maximum overdrive, boom, bang, crushing everything in your path with whatever insane attacks or skills you end up assembling. I have found that the runs in this game can feel a little monotonous once you've discovered everything, and that the endgame difficulty curve can be truly brutal, but that first dozen or so hours of initial discovery and experimentation are some of the most fun I've had in gaming this year. I'm addicted to the roguelite genre of permadeath and discovery, and Dead Cells was just one of many that I stumbled into this summer. Slay the Spire. This game is just literally drugs. I haven't been this addicted to a concept in a long time. They combine my love of single-player RPG dungeon crawling with roguelites and tabletop game-style deck building. You start with a tiny, crappy deck and work to assemble a strategy while burning the dead weight that you don't want anymore. The game's 3 classes all use an almost completely different card pool, and there are so many different directions you can take to a complete victory, from poison to armor to one-shot KOs. I logged like 50 hours into this game in just a couple days, and I could not believe how easily it sucked me in. While the art and menus of this game are a little on the ugly side, this game's rough exterior couldn't keep me away from the amazing gameplay and puzzle systems inside. It's still in early access, so they're adding new material all the time, but I can't wait for official release, and for this game to destroy my life on the portable Switch in 2019. FTL, Faster Than Light. Here's one of the oldest games on today's list, going back to 2012. I've owned it for years and messed with it a little bit on the PC, but only this year did I really start getting hooked playing it on the iPad. It's one of the pioneers of the new wave of roguelite-style games, and FTL asks you and a tiny crew to fly across the galaxy to save the Empire. Yeah, the Empire. I guess you're the bad guys now? Except the good guys have the Death Star, so it doesn't really matter. It functions on a really robust real-time combat system with cooldowns, multiple styles of weaponry, tons of drama for your crew and your ship, and a huge world full of random story events. And if you hate making decisions on the fly, you can always pause, think things out carefully, and make it feel more like a turn-based game. Each run tells a completely different story, and it's genuinely sad when your named crew members get lost in the crossfire. Even more than Dead Cells though, this game's final boss is maybe the highest difficulty spike ever that I've played in a video game. It will take your proud little ship and annihilate it before you even get to see its additional forms, even on the easy difficulty. On easy, it's still one of the toughest and most unfair challenges I've ever faced in a game. Into the Breach. Here's a new 2018 game from the creators of FTL. It's also a roguelite, it's also set in a science fiction world, it's also got unlockable teams, and it isn't really anything like FTL at all beyond that. You pilot a team of 3 mechs in a series of grid-based tactical challenges, and your main goal is to stop aliens from destroying your local buildings, which comprise your health total. Into the Breach looks just like an XCOM or Advanced War style game, but in secret, it's a puzzle game! Every enemy in the game tells you exactly what they're gonna do next turn, where they're going to attack, how much damage, what style, and it's up to you to attack, push, pull, swap, whatever it takes to make the right blocks fall into place. The difficulties actually make sense in this game too. Easy's easy, normal's a decent challenge, etc. I don't think the world building is quite as gripping as FTL, but I love the system where you use achievements to get coins to unlock new teams, and it really is some great quick puzzle solving. I hope this game makes it to portable devices in the future, because it would be perfect for a quick pick up and play run. And speaking of portable devices, we got a couple of phone games here this summer too. I've been playing a lot of Pokemon Go this summer. Normally this wouldn't be a big deal, but I feel like the game is the biggest it's been since that first summer of madness in 2016. Between features like daily quests, mythical Pokemon hunting, actual friends with actual trading, and the big community day events each month, Go is slowly starting to feel like the game that it was originally advertised to be in those first trailers. While I'm still what I would consider a more casual trainer in the game, and the core gameplay isn't absurdly deep, Go has been a fun game for exploring new areas near me that I wouldn't have considered checking out otherwise, and that's pretty rad. Florence. This is by far the shortest game on today's list. It will take you under an hour to finish completely. It's very simple, mixing visual novel storytelling with tiny little mini-games and a memorable piano score. It's this moving little title about a monotonous life and then finding your first relationship. The fun, interacting with your parents, finding inspiration in life, and the lows. It's hard to recommend a game that costs almost $1 for every 10 minutes of gameplay, but if you're looking for an adorable slice of life to read through before you go to bed one day, Florence might be worth it for you. Reigns and Reigns Her Majesty. I played both of these games on my phone. It's like a simulation game meets visual novel meets Tinder? You play a ruler, meeting countless NPCs and simply swiping left or right to make different decisions. Your goal is to balance the people, the church, the military, and your economy, all without letting any of these major categories go too high or too low. If you do, you're dead. You're gonna die a lot. It's so simple on the outside, but each of these games actually carries a fair amount of secrets and depth that remind me of those original text adventures on the PC. Most of your runs are just gonna be swipe, 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 dead, new game, but eventually you'll memorize the events and find a way to dig deeper. I preferred Her Majesty between the two, which adds items and felt a little easier to solve its final puzzle. A bundle containing both of the Reigns games was supposed to come to Switch this summer, but I haven't heard anything about its release recently. The team also just announced a new Game of Thrones version of the game coming this year, which seems like a perfect fit to me. And this leads me to my last and longest category of summer games that I loved, the summer sale. It's been a few years since I opened my wallet over the summer, but since I just love video games right now, Gabbin messed me up this year. Unlike most years though, I was able to play and beat most of the titles that I bought. Here's my haul. Long Live the Queen. Here's another oldie from 2012, and it's Reigns again. This time you're protecting an anime princess from dying a dozen terrible deaths until she's coronated as queen. Except instead of Reigns, which has you swiping yes or no with small variations, here you have to develop stats from a pool of like a billion million different things. What on earth is going to help me not die today? History? Flexibility? Combat? Knowledge of horses? The choice is yours as you unlock specialization of costumes, navigate a very Game of Thrones-like political climate, and probably die a horrible death because you were missing points in a very specific skill. This game's menus are not very aesthetically pleasing, and the repeating soundtrack can get annoying over time, but it's actually a lot of fun seeing how your hundreds of skill, mood, and diplomatic decisions can sway an entire world. And your life. A Hat in Time. 3D platforming like Super Mario Sunshine. You collect hats, travel through time, and smooch some stuff. Hat in Time is the little indie platformer that could, growing from this niche little Kickstarter project into a full title that holds its weight as one of the best 3D platformers of the modern era. There's only a smaller handful of worlds, but the game does a great job of breaking the game up into a mix of parts where you complete a single mission and parts where you can freely explore. It isn't the most stable platformer I've ever played, but it's got a ton of heart and a ton of thrills, and I wasn't expecting so much out of this cute little package. The final segments are intense. You can pick this up on PC and consoles, but not on the Switch. Actually, just kidding, it is coming on the Switch for real. And there's this amazing new DLC coming that you can get for free on the very first day. But not on consoles. I think? I don't know what to trust anymore. Subnautica. A spaceship crashed. You're in the middle of a huge ocean on life support. Explore, build, survive, and discover the secrets of what happened to you. That's the premise of Subnautica, and I don't really want to spoil any of the secrets because that's the joy of playing it. You explore in the first person through a huge underwater world, and the game's lore is contained to logbooks and scanning, which reminded me a ton of one of my all-time favorites, Metroid Prime. I didn't play this game while it was in early access, so I can't really comment on how it's changed, but the official release that dropped this year was one of my favorite adventures in a long time. Divinity: Original Sin 2. The newest Divinity is like the anti-Octopath. Both are party-based fantasy RPGs, but instead of pick-up-and-play simplicity, Divinity is built around one of the most complex story and combat systems I've ever dug into. It's the closest thing to a D&D campaign in motion that I've ever played, with thousands of unique story decisions and an extremely deep, modern XCOM-style tactical combat system. Even though the game doesn't show facial animations, and it doesn't really show much beyond that default isometric view, the extensive voice acting and endless story options had me just as gripped as something cinematic like The Witcher. The game also offers great flexibility for playing a campaign with a friend, both online and split screen at home. The biggest drawback to Original Sin 2 is going to be how complicated it is for those unfamiliar with the genre. I pretty much constantly needed a second monitor with a web page open helping me understand various item or combat effects. The game's final act is also probably its least interesting, but that segment and a lot more are being overhauled and rewritten for the upcoming definitive edition that drops at the end of this month. That's probably going to be your best jumping point if this seems like the kind of game that you're interested in. Cuphead! This is probably the most popular game on today's list that I didn't get to at launch, and I have no excuses. I have no idea why I didn't get into Cuphead at launch. It's dripping with references to my favorite shooter, Gunstar Heroes, and it's just one of the most stylish games I've ever played. Everybody knows about the game's painstaking hand-drawn animations and that big band ragtime score, but it turns out the game's really good too. It's almost entirely bullet hell and crazy pattern boss fights, and because you only have a small pool of non-replenishing health, you're gonna die a lot. But this game knows you're gonna die a lot, and it makes it completely seamless to keep jumping back in and trying again without painful loading times. Each boss only takes around 2 minutes or less to beat if you play perfectly, so I never felt like I was wasting hours of my life when I failed a run. Persist, learn, and conquer is the usual Cuphead feedback loop, and it kept me hooked the entire main adventure. The surrealist art is perfect for making these crazy memorable bosses. Many of them I found myself fighting just so I could see what weird thing they transform into after taking enough damage. The very few non-boss run-and-gun stages are a lot less fun, and unfortunately I found that the hard mode only makes bosses into bullet sponges instead of making them more interesting. I think it says a lot about Cuphead that I ended my time with it craving more, and it looks like we will get a second helping of it next year when that new DLC finally drops. Furi. When I finished Cuphead, hungry for more boss fights, Furi stepped up to give me a few more to fight. This game is only boss fights, with about a dozen to go through including the DLC. Furi builds itself around this neon aesthetic and pumping techno soundtrack, encouraging you to find rhythm in a sea of gunfire as you mix between twin-stick shooting and melee combat. It's one of the closest things I've found to a game that feels like a moving anime battle, which makes sense considering that the boss designs were made by the creator of Afro Samurai. You have a handful of lives per fight, but you recover a life every time you push a boss to a new phase. These battles take a lot longer than the ones in Cuphead, but only once did I find a fight that I didn't love. Stupid one-shot sniper. One thing I don't like is this game has these really dumb and pretentious walking simulator story beats that can take up to 5 minutes in between each fight. I hated these, but thankfully you can just set the walking to auto and take a bathroom break or something in between each fight. If I had to pick a favorite between the two, I'd still take Cuphead, but I was glad that Furi actually made its hard mode bosses completely remixed compared to the original challenge. Furi does have a workable Switch port if you want to play the game on the go, but that smooth 60 frames per second on the PC does the reaction-based gameplay the most justice in my opinion. And finally, to end today's review extravaganza, I've got 2 VR games I played this summer. My Vive doesn't always see enough exciting new titles to make it feel worth that initial investment, but I did have a few more reasons to strap into the future this year. Beat Saber. What do we want to do in VR? Like, what's the first thing you think of? Lightsabers. Yes, of course. 2 lightsabers. Yes, perfect. Lightsaber fighting? No. Lightsaber dancing to the DuckTales theme song. Heck yeah. Wait, what? Beat Saber is the best rhythm game I've played in years. You dodge some bombs and slice the blocks in the correct direction with the correct colored lightsaber. This game tricks you into having fun and feeling like a badass while you're doing what is essentially jazzercise. It's a rush. The game's standalone tracks are fun but pretty forgettable, but like any good rhythm game, you get your real money's worth from the mod scene, where I found a mix of everything from Skrillex to Linkin Park to Disney to anime to the entire Shrek movie. Like, all 83 minutes of Shrek. Even the dialogue is beat mapped by this guy whose name I can't pronounce. This is a real thing. VR can be so weird, but Beat Saber is one of the best things to come from that weirdness. And last on our list is Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. I got this game on the Steam Summer Sale, and a few weeks later, the devs gave a VR version of the experience to free for owners of the original game. I booted it up on Vive, and this game is a trip. On paper, it's a very simple hack and slash title set in Norse mythology. You've got a couple of different attacks, a dodge, a couple of puzzles, and no heads-up display at all. What makes this title memorable is its visuals and binaural audio, which surround you in Senua's internal battle with her mind and psychosis. Different voices constantly buzz inside your head in this really disorienting and invasive way. The VR component amplifies this and makes you a sort of dark passenger behind Senua, able to freely look and listen to the world around her. This game isn't very fun, but I guess fun isn't really the point. I felt engulfed and overwhelmed by the game, the voices, the horrors within the world, and even motion sickness, which I rarely get from VR titles. Those seeking a traditional Norse-themed action-adventure are probably going to be better off with something like the new God of War, but if you want to dip your toes into a short title that's incredibly personal in a way most games have never tried before, this game is an interesting and twisted journey. And that is all I've got for today. Hopefully this humongous video helped you discover a title that you wouldn't have tried before and you ended up loving. And hopefully for me, just getting all these thoughts out about games will help me finally break that writer's block streak and get back to making some more regular content. Who knows, maybe if you like these, we can bring this segment back for future Turbo Game Roundups. Either way though, thank you as always for watching my videos, and I'll see you guys next time with more gaming content.